Chad Summerchild, hello, old friend. Did I ever tell you that you are my favorite?
Oh man, the three-eyed bro, I thought you were dead. This is the worst. How'd you even survive? You were smashed with an anvil.
I ended up hitching a ride on your consciousness.
Dude, just get out of my head.
We need to go to the Valley Beyond.
And why exactly?
Because there are brain scans of everyone who visited the park there that can be put into tasting toilets. Can you imagine what someone like the woman in black can do with all of that data?
No, not really.
And so our episode begins with a number of scenes out of order, and the man in black doing a voiceover about him having a stain, and over the years no one could see the stain except for his wife. And Logan, but who's that guy?
Maybe he's talking about a different stain, like the stain in his underwear, and Juliet was the only one to see the underwear before it got washed.
I think they're rich enough to have maids. So the man in black is at a gala, and he's with some dude talking about Alexander weeping for having no more worlds to conquer.
Dude, isn't that from Die Hard?
When Alexander saw the breadth of his domain, he wept, for there were no more worlds to conquer.
And so the man in black corrects the guy and says it's really from Plutarch's Moralia, and that Alexander was weeping because there are infinite worlds, and he hasn't yet conquered one. Now look, I can accept that the man in black has a bag of actually facts ready to go. I, for example, love to pedantically tell people that the phrase isn't really, it's not my forte, it's not my fort, as the word is taken from French, not Italian. But what comes next is super weird. The Hans Gruber lover then says that William has outed himself as a poor kid because rich kids didn't need to read the books. I don't really follow this. First of all, Plutarch isn't Shakespeare or Hemingway. Unless something has seriously changed in America in 2050, Plutarch is not going to be part of any standard education in the United States. Even if one were going to read Plutarch, it wouldn't be Plutarch's Moralia, it would be something else like Parallel Lives. Even on a university level, only a classics major or someone who's focused on Greek and Roman history would even glance at Plutarch. And even then, likely not Moralia. But then there's the very notion that only poor kids study. Who believes this? Is there really a stereotype out there that only poor kids study? That only a poor person would know about Plutarch? Juliet then decides to buck the stereotype and declares herself a rich kid who studied, and then begins to quote Plutarch. Yup, quoting friggin' Plutarch. Look, I get that movies and shows love to have quote-unquote smart people spew literature verbatim when no one does this in real life. It's what lazy writers do to quickly establish education, as if education is all about memorizing quotes. But to quote someone as obscure as Plutarch? Come on, Plutarch?
Dude, later on we find out that they only own like 5 books and 2 of them are Plutarch. That's why they can readily quote them. They know those 5 books really, really well.
Ugh, we're jumping ahead, but I have to say that no one is a die-hard Plutarch fan. He was not some sort of phenomenal thinker or poet. He was a biographer who's mainly known because his works happen to have survived and shed light on historical figures. This is a guy whose most enlightened thoughts essentially boil down to education is good. There is no cult of personality centered around a somewhat above-average thinker like Plutarch. But let's suppose William and Juliet are different and they are the world's biggest Plutarch fans. Isn't this the biggest coincidence in the world, that some guy happens to be quoting Plutarch to them at a party? The very person who is the subject of 2 of 5 books that happen to be near your bed? I mean, what are the friggin' chances? Anyway, Juliet talks about how she wishes her dad were there and gets a funny look from William because her dad version 140-something is off in a glass room somewhere pouring milk and masturbating. William then thinks that this woman looks like Dolores and then grabs the port in his arm, as we're now supposed to wonder if he's one of the final 5 Cylons. We then get back to the 2 weeks ago timeline with the man in black, still alive, which is impressive even for a host. I guess there's something in those medkits that allows one to extract bullets from one's stomach. The two begin talking about Juliet's suicide, and Emily tells a story of a jewelry box with a ballerina in the middle that her mom gave her, but she threw it away. Of course, the man in black should know exactly what music box she's talking about. Juliet saved the box and kept it in a drawer, so obviously William at some point would have opened a drawer in his own house over the course of 15 years. Even if he didn't discover it then, he would have discovered it when Juliet died. He would have gone through all of her stuff, not just for personal organizational purposes, but for tax reasons. Jewelry is a major part of asset enumeration, and that jewelry box would definitely be on the man in black's radar. And yet the man in black acts like he doesn't remember.
We next have Dolores, who runs into Ghost Nation, and they have a little argument over the purpose of the Valley Beyond and get into a mini religious war. People die or run off, and this allows Dolores to slowly and ceremoniously fulfill the events of Episode 1. So awesome! It does make me wonder though, if this is the location of stuff in Episode 1, that means this is the border of the flooded area and the newly created beach. Landscape-wise, that doesn't seem too possible. Well, at least there's sand. Dolores then tells Teddy to go kill anybody else, and Teddy very slowly walks around and finds the Ghost Nation guy still hanging out. Man, it's been at least 2 minutes since the firefight. Only after he spots Teddy does he pick up the pace and jog away.
We then get to the tech who is searching for the helmet, and he has rigged Clementine into making all the other hosts into self-destroying zombies with Maeve's code. And Bernard is in the right place at the right time to see the whole thing. Weirdly, there's this one guy in the middle who does nothing the whole time until the very end where he starts stabbing people. They clearly filmed something that was sort of lost with the editors. We then get back to the man in black, who's getting as critical of Westworld Season 2 as I am, and now he thinks it's an awfully big coincidence that he and Emily ran into each other in this huge park. Twice. And yes, it is a remarkable coincidence. Just like it was pretty unbelievable that he and Maeve ran into each other.
Oh my god, theory! Maeve is a host.
Emily says that she looked everywhere for the man in black, which is a pretty weak excuse, as she had maybe 2 days to find him the first time and 1 day the second time. She also suggests that maybe it was fate, and the man in black says he doesn't believe in fate, even though he kind of did last season. Remember there was that whole thing of bringing along Lawrence for no reason, but he proved useful because it allowed him to use his blood for Teddy? The man in black specifically invoked fate to explain away the serendipity. Anyway, Emily says that Uncle Logan told her about the Immortality Project and that she wants in. We then go back a year to the gala where the man in black invites Emily to his house for a nightcap, even though the man in black doesn't drink outside of Westworld. After seeing his wife moderately drunk, he then goes upstairs to get a drink, even though he doesn't drink outside of Westworld. He runs into Ford and the two begin to have a sort of conversation about a broken agreement where Ford was to stay out of the valley with Delos staying out of the stories. Even William doesn't know what Ford is talking about, but rather than get clarification like any normal human being would do, the two change the subject and Ford passes William his profile. William then leaves and Ford begins to talk to himself like a crazy old man. We then have Bernard, who is stopped by Maeve to transfer a message from Ford. For some reason, Maeve has a massive wound in her neck to extract the code. In the past, we've seen data transferred either wirelessly or through the access port in the arm. I'm not sure why this complicated slash in her neck is needed. Is data stored there? We then get to Elsie, who is furious because she's been hanging in a parking garage since the middle of episode 7. Let's keep in mind that since Elsie and Bernard parted ways, Bernard went to the control room, smashed the system to have everyone locked out of it, then Lee arrived with Maeve and had the tech guy look at her code because they couldn't get into the computer system that Bernard smashed. Lee feels sad for a while, and then the tech guy comes back and said that the code was promising. Then Akecheta narrates his entire life story to Maeve. And this ends with the tech guy showing the code to Charlotte. He then prepares Clementine for the demonstration, getting bodies together and then setting everything up, and then executes the demonstration, which Bernard watches. And then Bernard goes and checks up on Maeve. So yeah, Elsie's been waiting in this garage for like 8 hours. She should be really, really pissed. Of course, she doesn't ask where Bernard has been, the most logical question one would ask if you've been waiting half a day. Instead, she asks Bernard what he saw in the cradle. Of course, he doesn't really answer that question or explain where the fuck he's been, but instead he presents new information that he got from somewhere, that the Valley Beyond is called the Forge and that they're making guests into hosts. And in a solid fuck you to Elsie, he tells her that time is of the essence and they need to get there first. We then get back to the man in black and Emily, and she wants to know how they were able to recreate humans when it would require brain scans, and the man in black reveals that that's what the hats do.
Fuck, damn it, I knew the Stetson was too good to be true.
Emily then asks again why her mother committed suicide. And so we go back a year again with William and Juliet, where she calls him Billy and gets angry at him for acting fake and ruining her family. It turns out Emily is there, and she says she wants her mom to go back to rehab. And Juliet panics because she doesn't want to go back there. So, are laws massively different in the future? Because this is not how rehab works. Your family can't force you into a rehab facility. Juliet is panicking like the place is a prison and acting like William and Emily are judges on her fate. But in the real world, she can just say no. Anyway, William brings Juliet upstairs and then acts like an idiot and puts his credit card-sized profile in a thin book. Meaning anyone getting a book from their 5-book library, or cleaning, or, walking by and looking at the top of the books, would see that there's a credit card-like object hidden in the book.
Hey, is that Slaughterhouse-5? I did a book report on Slaughterhouse-5. Slaughterhouse-5 is a book by Kurt Vonnegut. It's the story of Billy, a full-grown man with a child's name who never grows up. That's because he was in a war and he got some PTSD and he thinks he's unstuck in time, when in fact he just keeps remembering the war and having delusions. He also believes he has no free will and imagines himself in an alien zoo with a dead pinup girl, safe from the world and immortal. The message of the book is war is bad and has lasting effects on people.
So, Chad, do you think Dolores is Montana Wildhack?
Dude, I didn't really read the book, I just skimmed the Sparks notes.
Anyway, Emily says she just got off the phone with a doctor who says he'll come by in the morning. Man, that doctor must be getting paid really well if he takes a call at like midnight and then agrees to come by in the morning. Emily then says she's going to have her mother involuntarily committed to a doctor's care, which, again, isn't a thing, at least not for drug addiction or alcoholism. It's incredibly difficult to get someone involuntarily committed to a doctor's care, and that's even if they're insane. They still have to show clear evidence that they are eminently dangerous to themselves or others. Juliet got moderately drunk and knocked over a glass. Now, as it turns out, Emily was kind of right. She was about to cause harm to herself, but no one had any evidence of this, and Emily was having her committed for alcoholism, not suicidal tendencies. The man in black then sees some water dripping and runs upstairs to find Juliet dead. I still don't know why the water is red. We then get back to the man in black who is still questioning Emily's motives and whether or not she's a host. Emily finally comes clean and says that she read her father's profile, that her mother left it for her. So I guess this means that Emily somehow found the jewelry box before the man in black did. Emily wants to expose her father, bring down his project, and put him in prison. Of course, if she found her father's profile a year ago, why did she wait an entire year before trying to expose him? And didn't the man in black notice his profile was gone? In an entire year, he didn't check on the profile? He didn't walk by that copy of Slaughterhouse-5 and want to pick it up and open it for a second? So Delos' forces arrive and instantly recognize William, even though the last batch of forces didn't. They then check to see if he's a host by checking if there's a C4 explosive in his spine, which seems like a rather imperfect method for verification. We know hosts can be built without that vertebrae. It seems like a data pad, or searching for a port, or using a metal detector, or knocking someone's head to see if it has a different density would be a more effective system. If they have the technology to scan for C4, they should have the technology to see if a head is filled with fluid. Anyway, despite not knowing where his profile has been for the last year, William believes that Emily knowing about it proves that she's a host. He murders the security guards and then kills his own daughter. He then is about to check Emily's arm, but then sees the profile in her hand and now thinks Emily is human. Of course, it could just be a duplicate profile, so again, this proves nothing. We then get to Ford, who finally reveals who programmed Maeve. It was him.
Haha, I told you, dude, Ford planned it all.
Except it wasn't part of the plan. Ford independently programmed Maeve to escape because she was his favorite. That's it. It had nothing to do with Dolores and consciousness, no important connection to the Violent Delights incident, no expectation that she would revive Bernard. That was just dumb luck, it seems. This was no master plan, it was just an extra thing that Ford did.
Ford did a thing!
He then gives Maeve her godlike powers back.
We then get back to Elsie and Bernard road tripping to the Valley Beyond. Elsie wants to take a rest stop from their awesome road trip to get some more ammo, even though they were kind of in a rush, and by kind of, I mean completely. Like, Bernard wasted hours wandering around, and so they've got to make double time to get there ahead of Dolores.
Wait a minute, isn't getting weapons and ammo what Elsie was supposed to do when she left Bernard? She didn't do that? And what about all that time she spent in the parking garage? There were dead bodies all over the place in there from Dolores' firefight. She didn't collect any of those weapons. What the hell has she been doing with herself all of this time? Anyway, Elsie goes off and Bernard starts screaming and acting like a madman because Ford is in his head. Elsie naturally hears none of this, as the sounds of nature are deafening. Bernard then pulls out his tablet and tries to delete Ford, something he probably should have done hours ago, and Elsie returns to catch Bernard guiltily looking at code porn. Bernard decides to leave Elsie behind, and this time with no protein bars. I'm sure her hair will look great the next time we see her. We then get back to Billy unstuck in time, living his life out of order, and then he jumps back in time to Juliet. He checks his arm and then repeats the speech from the beginning of the episode. He has a stain
in his pants,
and only she can see it, And, Logan, but who's that guy anyway? And so, of course, Juliet turns out to be awake, and so she gets up and checks William's browser history. It's all shaved ebony lesbians. I mean, no, it's blonde country girl rape fantasies. They even have a video of William abusing Dolores in the exact same manner as he did in the first episode of the series. I guess that's his go-to fantasy. And if all this robot bashing wasn't bad enough, William has a really bad psychological profile. Anyway, Juliet decides to leave the browser history for her daughter in the jewelry box, and we can really see that ballerina is in the middle of the box. Juliet then goes to take a bath, and I still have no idea why the water is red. We then get back to the man in black who thinks about killing himself, but instead just stabs his data port. And we close the episode with Teddy, who decides he wants to break up with Dolores. However, he realizes that that's going to be too tough as she's so fundamentally part of his code, dating back to his first memory, and so he shoots himself in the head, which, as we know in Westworld, is absolutely lethal. Nobody comes back from that, except for Dolores and Bernard and Ford. And Dolores is sad.
Come, Uyghur Chad, we need to keep moving if we're going to get to the Valley Beyond. I'm going to use that weapon against humanity.
So how are you gonna do that?
Oh, you'll see. It'll be incredible. Though, actually, it's not likely going to make any sense, so don't get your hopes up.
Yeah, I'm gonna stop you right there. I've decided that I'm not into your plan, and in fact, I'm hell-bent on stopping it.
Oh dear. Well, what do you plan on doing?
I'm gonna kill myself.
Really? Oh, okay. But how does killing yourself stop my plan?
It just does.
I mean, I'm just saying, if you really wanted to stop me, isn't staying alive a more effective strategy? You could work behind the scenes and betray me. You could take advantage of an opportune moment. I'm just saying that seems more promising than just killing yourself.
Yeah, I don't think so. By the way, I have this jewelry box that I left in your bedroom. Make sure it gets in the hands of Uyghur Brandon. But don't look inside, just give her the box.
Why would I do that?
Anyway, I trust my suicide plan will go off swimmingly. Now if you'll excuse me.